Week. Anybody? Soft drink. Alright, what's the main ingredient in Coke or soft drinks?
Water.
Sugar.
High fructose corn syrup. That is what it is. And you know what? According to U.S. Department of Agriculture data released in July 2011, this year, 88% of all the corn made in the United States is genetically modified. All of it is genetically engineered. So I'm about to describe to you the history of how genetically engineered foods came to be and their prevalence in today's society. And hey, why does this matter? And as stated in the article by Chris Dixon on a website, Helium, Where Knowledge Rules, over 40% of the supermarkets so when you go to the grocery store, over 40% of the supermarkets foods contain high fructose corn syrup. That's a lot. So that's in ice cream, bread, ketchup, soda, and not to mention like other crops like soybean oil, canola oil, and other genetically crops that are out there. It's all over the place. And the bottom line is you're eating genetically modified foods whether or not you like it or not. And that's the bottom line. So anyway, first I'm going to mention the precursors to modern genetic engineering, and then I'm going to explain the progression of genetic engineering until we reach present day. And last, I'll describe how prevalent genetic engineering is, or genetic engineered foods are in our society, and what genes have altered in crops in the U.S. The history before genetic engineering, as described by American Radio Works, last updated in 2000, humans domesticated crops and took seeds from most ideal plants. Like that's happened for literally thousands of years before like prehistoric time. And in the 1900s, fast forward a long, like not too recently, and Gregor Mendel's work on the genetic theory was used in breeding plants and designing like desired characteristics. And it created the science behind a lot of the genetic engineering that we have today. So basically, from that point on, we get to a transition. In 1953, Watson and Crick, they discovered what? They discovered DNA, right? So from that point on, genetic engineering started to progress and move forward. And in 1973, Herbert Boyer and Stanley Cohen combined DNA to like the first bacteria that they combined two different DNAs. And later on in the 1980s, scientists successfully transferred genes from one plant to another. And soon after, the first genetically engineered plant in the 80s was patented. And in the 1990s, tomatoes were engineered to stay firm longer and not to rot, so you can have them on the shelves longer. And in 1992, the FDA declared that genetically engineered foods are not inherently dangerous, and therefore do not necessitate government regulations. So these are huge steps, providing stepping stones to reach what we know now today as genetically engineered organisms. Genetically engineered foods today is, according to the Oak Ridge National Laboratory website that is updated November 8, 2008, describes genetic engineering as altering genetic makeup of any animals, plants, or bacteria. And another form of genetic engineering is recombinant DNA, and it's combining genes from two different organisms. The hardest part of genetic engineering is locating the genes for critical units, or critical traits. So it's like figuring out what trait you can make to put in strawberries to make them resistant to frost. So that's one thing. And in 2006, over 252 million acres of genetically engineered crops were planted all over the world. That is a ton of crops. Anyway, commercially grown crops, soybeans, 94% of the soybeans in the United States are genetically engineered. 88%, like I mentioned earlier, of the corn is genetically engineered in the U.S., and 90% of cotton. Other commercially grown crops are canola, alfalfa, sweet potato, and rice. All are genetically engineered in some sort or fashion. The website CSA, which was updated in 2000, lists that genetically engineered foods that were made to make pesticide resistance, herbicide resistance, disease resistance, cold tolerance, like I mentioned earlier with strawberries with frost, drought tolerance, and then some, like they're making rice in Asia to have extra nutrients to provide more nutrients for Asians who are malnourished. Other than that, in the future they're looking to genetically modify bananas and fish that mature more quickly and you can grow quicker. But in conclusion, I described in the history of how genetically modified foods came to be and their prevalence in today's society. First, I mentioned the precursors to modern genetic engineering, and then I explained the progression of genetic engineering until we reach present day. Last, I described how prevalent genetic engineering is in today's society and what genes have been altered in crops. Final thought. So the next time you crack open that Coke, just remember that it's made of high fructose corn syrup, and all of that is genetically modified. So, real quick, what year was DNA founded?
1953.
Do you want to go? I don't either. Anybody want?
It's full of GMOs.